social practices and social uses and the ecosystem.
Okay. Oh, sorry. So, the ecosystem services approach is something that's been quite present in current literature, and so there's quite a lot of expectations from policymakers and researchers on what it might bring as new solutions. This is just a quick illustration to show you the context. There's lots of specific studies coming out, as you might know, the TEEB report, for example. Should go back one second. Just going to the next slide. Sorry. And this is also a slide to show you that even though examples of ecosystem services might be quite obvious, such as pollination, for example, the expectations that there are in terms of what it may be used for, such as evaluations, it's not so obvious to make the link between the two. So this is really where ESAWADI focused on.
Yeah, and well, the result of this is that at times people say that it's too abstract, too complex notion, and very difficult to introduce in operational programs. And therefore, you will see our effort was to really see how this concept can make sense for the people, and little by little going to more tricky aspects, but which makes sense for the stakeholders.
Okay, so in practice, our project was started with European partners, but each of us decided to focus in our own country for this case studies. And so what we had to do is very much adopt an operational attitude and look at the current constraints at the different levels of scale in which our stakeholders operate in. So at the European level, obviously, there's the Water Framework Directive, but we have to take into consideration other national and local initiatives that our stakeholders would have to deal with. So this is just an illustration of the different scales, and to say that even though in practice WFD was our entry point, we also had to take into consideration a more wider scope, and as such the project also looked at integrated water resource management as a whole. Okay, so the framework of analysis for our 3 case studies was, first of all, not just to look at WFD but also integrated water resource management. Our entry point was very much to start by identifying a specific water management issues at the local level for which the ecosystem services approach might bring a response. And this took us actually quite a lot of time to, even though most of the partners on the project do have contacts and with local water managers through previous studies and previous interactions, it's not so obvious to actually identify key management issues which the ESA might be relevant for. So in terms of the themes that we explored, there are 4 mainly. They are the links between ESA and WFD economic requirements. There's a word missing there, economics. So for those of you who are familiar with these, the economic requirements, we looked in particular at the articles regarding cost recovery, cost effectiveness, and disproportionality of costs. The second theme we looked at was ESA and good ecological status. The third was participation, and the 4th, decision making. The 3 case studies took place in France, Germany, and Portugal. I've got 3 slides on the case studies. I'm not going to read in detail what the details are, but I'll just give you a quick overview of the different key issues in each of the countries. So in France, we focused on the middle stretch of the Dordogne River, which is in the southwest of France. Our partners there, the main entry point was with the Dordogne Basin Integrated Management Board, EPIDOR, and in partnership with the Agence de l'eau à Dour-Garonne. The key entry points and themes that we looked at are the river dynamics and hydrogeomorphological issues, and as well as the impacts of hydroelectricity. And the idea being that we wanted to look at how the ESA might influence policy making. Okay, in Germany, the case study was set along the transboundary river Ems, which borders Germany and Holland on a part of its stretch. More specifically, the team there focused on the Hasse River, which is one of the sub-basins of the Ems. Again, one of their key issues was hydromorphological pressures, and in particular lateral connectivity. There's quite a strong local issue regarding eel migration, and therefore conflicts between environmental associations and hydropower operators on this issue. In Portugal, the study area was the Mondego Estuary, and the key issues that we looked at in detail were mainly to do with eutrophication symptoms and the impacts on the quality of the water in the estuary. Oops, sorry. So in overall, we have 3 very different case study settings, different contexts. Each of the case studies implemented the ESA approach in relation to integrated water management and WFD. So we will present today our results, but even though there are quite many, it's very hard to generalize up to European level since there's only 3 case studies. We will share specific and common experiences with you today, from which we can draw insights and make suggestions for way ahead in terms of research and operational aspects. Just the last slide from me on research context and expectations regarding ESA. Very recently, we're starting to see the integration of ecosystem services in many policy documents and regulations. I've just taken 3 examples here to show you. There's a recent TEEB report on ecosystem services for water and wetlands that was produced very recently at the beginning of this year, who, for example, focuses on how capturing the values of ecosystem services aim to provide, better informed, more efficient and fairer decision making. So there's again big expectations on valuing ecosystem services. The EU biodiversity strategy also stresses that by 2014 ecosystem services will be measured by each member state, and beyond that it will be valued by 2020. And at the national level in France, I just take an example. We're working at the moment on regional ecological coherence strategies, and a requirement there is to analyze ecosystem services that are provided and to look at the trends and pressures on these. So there.
Yeah, and therefore, one of the expectations from ecosystem services is that it will help to better relate the Water Framework Directive to other policies and schemes related to biodiversity. So now we'll enter in the actual implementation of the ESAWADI project. So as it was said, our main concern was to respond to the need of water managers, policymakers, who have to implement Water Framework Directive and integrated water basin management schemes. And to do so, we involve these end users right from the beginning through consultations, workshops regarding the ESA at the regional scale. And for example, in France, we had a workshop which was more related to the communication of the concepts and educational approach, and one which was more related to decision making. Besides, interviews were conducted at the beginning and the end of the project with different water managers, and in France and Germany we had also interviews with economists who had to implement the economic requirements of Water Framework Directive. Therefore, while looking at the project result, it is very important to see how they take into account expectations, fears and demands voiced by these end users. I mean, the project was somehow oriented by the concern of these people. And we adopted for the final report and for this presentation a structure where first we see what are the concerns, expectations of water managers, what are the insights on the ESA concept and its implementation. I mean, the difficulties and potential for its implementation. And then after that, we evaluate the added value of ESA for education and participation, as well as decision making. And last, we deal with the specific aspect of Water Framework Directive economic requirements and how ESA could contribute to this requirement. Well, what I should say is that if you go to ESAWADI site, you will find the final version of the German and the Portuguese report. The final version of the French report is still to be loaded on the project. We are going to finish it next week. And also we have a preliminary version of the synthesis report. But we had a lot of work to improve this report, and the final version should be uploaded in April. A part of this synthesis report and of the discussion we had was to clarify what are the tasks which have to be implemented when you want to do and implement ESA approach. We consider that from an operational point of view, the first task, which is very important, is to analyze the context for setting objectives and methodology of ESA. Because once you know the context, when you know the objectives in relation with a specific policy of a specific program, you are in a better position to organize the work and to make some methodological choices related to the scale, for example, related to the type of services you will consider. And also, it's a stage where you can see what are the stakeholders and the people who should be involved in your work. Then after that, you have a quite classical approach, which is identifying, characterizing, and selecting relevant ecosystem services. Then we added a third task that you may consider as part of the second task, but we thought interesting to make it something specific to show its importance. It is the analysis of the link between ecological function, ecological status, and ecosystem service provision. And behind this task, there are some difficulties also, methodological problems, but as far as you can do, on the basis of the data which are available, it's very important to to analyze this link and see what type of evaluation can be done. As we said, for us, it's the core of ecosystem services approach, and it's the main input quantification, and whatever comes after that will be much better done if this third work is done. But even doing this third task is quite important to improve the understanding of stakeholders on how the river function and how you can improve the river functioning. Then there is a task of evaluating ecosystem services. This valuation can be done in qualitative, quantitative, which physical terms, or in monetary terms. And well, according to the data available, according to the objectives. And then you have to use this ES assessment in decision making, utilizing different decision making support method and tools. There is another task, which is organizing people, stakeholders' participation. Though for us, this task has to be implemented all along the process as a component of other tasks. Different stakeholders can contribute at different stages, but we experienced, and other researcher and water manager experienced, that even for identifying services, identifying some valuable data on the quality of ecosystem, local stakeholders can be very important. So then, first findings, we started also from some perceived concern towards ESA concepts and towards ESA implementation. We experienced, particularly in France, that some people feel a risk that ecosystem services maximization goal replaces GES goal, and that there is a kind of, the utilitarian approach of ecosystem services takes a very strong importance, leading to some kind of commoditization of nature. While GS goal is a goal where the quality, the intrinsic value of ecosystem, the quality of ecosystem is a goal in itself. Then also there is a risk of maximizing some highly valued ecosystem services at the expense of others. There is a risk also that if you, for example, want to assess ecosystem services at a very local scale, that the evaluation is not relevant, and because there is a loss of the river basin dimension. And when you deal about ecosystem services related to a river, the water basin dimension is very important, because the place of provision of the service and the place of use of the service are different. And for example, if you have wetlands, related to the water ecosystem and river ecosystem, and you deal with the service of flood prevention. You have different wetlands. It's a system of wetlands which contribute to the service. This is oh, all right.
Back.
Hello.
Yes, that's okay. I don't know what quite happened there. Everyone should be back. I lost the connection for a little while.
And the last concern is that ecosystem services can be too abstract concept and methods, quantification, which are not robust enough and misleading. For us, these concerns are some points to which we should be, of which we should be aware, and we should develop a method which is makes that we don't fall in these problems. And for example, for the abstract concept, when we okay. Is it better now, Julia? No? Okay.
Yes,
okay.
That's certainly better on my side.
Yeah, okay. And then, for example, for the abstract concept, when we had a workshop in Dordogne River, we first started from what the people know, what their experience of the river. We gave simple example of ecosystem services, and then we worked with the people on different ecosystem services when they had well understood the concept and when they could relate it to their experience. But at the same time, there are strong expectations to weather as a concept and for its implementation. One is that it can provide a comprehensive approach where you have a very thorough identification, characterization, evaluation of ecosystem services. It is also valuable. It is expected to be a valuable tool to identify relevant groups of stakeholders, and particularly when you deal with indirect services or services related to some complex processes, ecological processes. Some people who don't think that they benefit from ecosystem services can discover that they benefit from these services. And you have to identify the stakeholders. It can also help people to understand and discuss ecological processes and highlight potential services that attaining GS will allow. Some of the water economists told us that it can give consistency to the whole water framework directive approach, particularly between the technical, natural science and engineering components and people, and the socio-economic component. It is expected to be able to integrate with existing local water management practices, and it is expected to produce tools and methodology which allow to engage fruitful negotiation. So these were some of the expectations that we could find in the people with whom we discussed, and to some extent we could experience that these expectations are founded, that we can implement ESA in a way where you give a response to the expectation, a positive response to these expectations. But one point which is important is that the ES concept is still in its infancy, and there are still lots of scientific debates which are ongoing on definition, what are ecological processes, function, ES categories. And we find that these debates are important, and we could still foster this type of debates, and don't, reduce the ES concept to closed definition at this stage. But this creates a problem when you want to implement this approach on a large scale, for example, for Water Framework Directive implementation. ESA is, yes, we can say that ESA is a structured and systemic approach for characterizing benefit that ecosystem provide to society. And it brings new perspective into account by eliciting expert and local users' knowledge and helping expert and local users to interact in this identification of services. Socio-economic setting, ecosystem status help understand why some services are not yet in use. This is, what we said about potential versus effective services, and how some improvement measures could make these services effective. Well, it can help to describe when you have to assess the effect of this improvement. It may be more difficult. We experience also that monetary evaluation is not always required. It should not be the sole goal of ESA implementation. It is expensive, and when we say this, it is to say that you shouldn't try to do monetary evaluation with too little physical means, human and monetary means. And also that ecosystem services approach doesn't solve by itself the usual limitation and difficulties with environmental economics. And qualitative description and physical quantification can be very useful. When we say that, we don't say that you shouldn't go to monetary evaluation, but we shouldn't consider that it is a sole goal, as I said, and we should go with adequate means. So, as a decision-making tool, ESA is expected to provide solutions for valuing benefits of ecosystem, including monetary values. However, ESA cannot very often offer robust quantitative assessment. So, the legitimacy of the valuation result may be low. So, we have to be cautious about it. As we said, it doesn't solve assessment of environmental policy program benefits due to limited data sometimes and lack of standardized methodologies. So we may face difficulty on this. There is uncertainty on results generated by quantification valuation method, and it's a strong barrier for adoption. For example, in France, Water Agency economists experience that the value of benefit can be directly related to the budget allocated to the evaluation and to the extent of investigation, which is a strong limit to the result. So there is a lack of trust that identification of ecosystem services alone can justify measures in favor of good ecological status. Some people fear also that ecosystem services benefits will never compete with benefits from production like hydroelectricity or agriculture, and therefore they will justify decisions which do not go in favor of the environment. I will bring straight answer to this fear. Is that, of course, when you are in a context of water management, you may have strong actors with strong economic interest. But one of the goals you can have, and ecosystem services approach can help you to in this task, is to enlarge the discussion to other stakeholders. Often you have a very clear and concentrated economic benefit, and you are diffuse indirect benefits due to economic ecosystem services. So, as we said, the ESA approach can help to identify the whole range of stakeholders, bring the stakeholder to discussion, and somehow through the local elected members to the water managers, bring the people who have strong interest to take into account other interests. But due to these different problems, some of the water managers say that ESA is too much work for hardly any benefit. Of course, as you will see, we don't share this perspective, and this is why also the first step of identifying what is your goal and to choose a methodology which is adapted to the goal, which is adapted to the means, and maybe not less ambitious, but which brings value.
Is everyone back available? I'll have to put Philippe as a presenter again. I'm sorry, but for some reason I was disconnected there. I'm back in, and hopefully Philippe can carry on. I'm not quite sure what happened there. My apologies for that. I'm not sure if it did affect your listening.
Yes. Okay, so we, as a conclusion for decision-making tool, we find that their contribution is to provide broad, comprehensive view of impacts on ecosystem uses of the maintenance, improvement of ecosystem. In most cases, full quantification of benefits is not required or possible. Further research is required to improve valuation method, and particularly questions like value transfer. Another point is that ESA can support traditional environmental economic tools through production of qualitative, semi-quantitative, and quantitative data, and inclusion in method like cost-benefit analysis or multi-criteria analysis. And then we experience that, but it's not only in relation with ESA, but when the legitimacy of data is not so strong because you have methodological problems, this legitimacy can be enhanced through participatory decision-making processes. That people agree that, well, okay, we cannot have the right value, but we agree that what is presented gives a fair view of the situation. Okay. For example, to illustrate what was said before, the Portuguese partners experimented the use of ecosystem services with the Molino software, which have been developed with the support of European Commission. And they tested different ecosystem services improvement scenarios and measures. And to assess the effectiveness of the measures, the case study team looked at impacts on 4 different bundles of ecosystem services. Some more related to water quality, a selection of ecosystem services, indirect ecosystem services, direct ecosystem services. And they used two methods. And what is shown in the table below is the rank of the different composition of measures. For example, you can see that with the SO methodology, if your main objective is water quality, the alternative 112 is the best one. It is the best one for direct services, whereas for the other objectives, it's 187. And if you use TOPSIS, it's another methodology which is another set of measures which is best. But, well, this, if you want to enter in details about this methodology, it is developed in the Portuguese case study report. The German partner based their work a lot on discussion and participation of water manager and other stakeholders. And they identified and rated the relevance and potential improvement of ecosystem services with the partners through workshops. We go to the concern expectation with ESA as an educational tool and participation support. It is seen as a good educational tool for promoting local water policy by some of the people we met, because it gives emphasis to the benefit of unknown and unrepresented ecosystem services, for example, cultural services. There is a concern that concept is too abstract or complex, but ESA is also perceived as a good tool to identify systematically stakeholders and possible conflicts. There is also warning that the choice of scale will change the stakeholders taken into account. So this is quite important to keep in mind. Our experience is that ESA is a good communication and environmental education support tool, because if implemented correctly, it can create common ground on benefits of ecosystem protection and restoration with a very systematic approach of direct and indirect services. It can bring awareness on ecological processes and potential services, help people to better understand the ecological processes. It can be to be an effective tool, the key is to provide accurate pictures of ecosystem services at stake, together with data. So data may not be the value of ecosystem itself, but it can be trends based on indicators which give a good idea of the service. Maps, not GIS, very precise maps at local level, but strategic maps, sketchy map can be very useful. unfortunately, we couldn't really experience this approach within ESAWADI. But based on other experience we had, we think it can be a very good tool. Relation between benefits and ecological processes should be highlighted, and services resulting from improvement measure should be highlighted. And greater effort required from scientific community to make concept messages understandable by a large public. But at the same time, I mean, when you have experts from scientific community, you have people who implement ESA and moderate meetings. It's a good way to foster the dialogue between scientists and stakeholders. And ESA is a good participation tool to include all stakeholders in deliberative process. So here is what we did in France in the workshop where we work on the educational value of ecosystem. As it was said, we work on hydromorphology. So the first step was to identify with the participants some services. So they identified services, we complemented, we discussed, we had a list of services, and then we had a presentation which was made to explain what are the hydromorphological processes and what are the hydromorphological compartments. And you see sediments, dynamic conservation. I mean, some objective also in relation with hydromorphology, some compartments. And then people were put in small groups and said how far this measure of improvement in relation with this hydromorphological compartment will contribute to that service. And then once each group had filled up the table, we had a discussion, and it was an opportunity to explain things and to discuss things and to know what is the actual understanding, the present understanding of the people and how we could improve it. And then is also what we did in France to summarize the measures which are related to hydro-peaking, I mean to the way to manage hydropower plants. And so you see that the ecological processes and the impact of hydro-peaking on the ecosystems. Then you have, you have the impacts which are here. And then you have identification of some beneficial effects to man of the ecosystem, the hydromorphology of the ecosystem, and how it is influenced by hydro-peaking. And then you have the link with these services and the water uses. So this, we used it for discussion with the people, but also for decision making. It's a way to summarize in a diagram all the relation between water management measures and the ecosystem services provision. As for water framework economics, what we experience and what we could see that water economic elements are already a challenge for most water managers. I mean, this implementation of water economic, it's quite tough. At the same time, particularly for France, we had a very interesting and good experience of implementing this water framework directive economic requirements. And there are many expectations at European and national level, policy-making level on ESA as a solution for applying water framework directive economics. But still, many methodological uncertainties remain, which question the benefit of ESA in comparison with other economic methods. So, if we took one of the participants of the project, Estuary Intervis, is a specialist of water framework directive economics and has been in different groups. And his feeling is that limited number of transparent systematic methods exist which fulfill water framework directive economic requirements and have been implemented. what we experience both in Germany and France is that river basin district economists are a bit reluctant to adopt another cumbersome approach on top of existing complex economic requirements, which means that if ESA has to be introduced, it shouldn't be at the cost of much more work to do and complex work to do, in addition to the work which has already to be done to implement Water Framework Directive's requirements. However, ESA can be used in other ways than full quantification and monetization. For example, for Article 5, Water Uses Services, the characterization of the district, ESA could give a good illustration of socioeconomic uses of aquatic ecosystem in relation with the status of these ecosystems. For cost effectiveness of measures, ESA can be used, so for the assessment of cost effectiveness of measure, as a qualitative assessment of ecosystem services and a broader approach of benefits. Even if you have in a cost-effective approach, which means that your main goal is reaching the good status, it can be interesting to compare two measures which are able to achieve this goal, not through the only filter of cost, but also to see that one measure may be a bit more costly, but can fulfill other benefits than good ecological status. It can therefore help to prioritize between measures and prioritize between water bodies where you will implement measures. For disproportionality of cost, ESA can be used for systematic identification of benefits to include in cost-benefit analysis. It can provide qualitative information for non-market benefit, for integration not in the CBA but in multi-criteria analysis. There are discussions to not restrict to CBA approach for the disproportionality of cost, but also to have a multi-criteria approach. For cost recovery, there are debates. Some economists, particularly in France, consider that ESA is not adequate because too disputable for assessing environmental and resource cost. And some people feel that even with financial cost, you can show that there is not a good recovery of cost, and you should not fragilize, make weaker your argumentation with data which are more disputable. But it's not a general point of view. Payment for ecosystem services, it's not yet, as such in Water Framework Directive ecosystem requirements, but there are a lot of discussion about it. The broad feeling is that ESA can help to identify services, practices for which a payment is relevant. But in most of the cases, it should not be used for calculating the financial compensation levels. That is the payment that you will give, for example, to a farmer for to implement some measures. So, broadly speaking, there is a need for new improved tools, good practice to incorporate ES in ecosystem services in semi-quantitative way, or in combination of quantitative and qualitative data into decision matrix. The key is to have tools we can help to engage fruitful discussion with stakeholders with easy to understand evidence. So this is to say that, we should understand that for ESA we are still at the level of experimentation, and we should have more experimentation to develop good methods, but we think that there is a potential. Conclusion. To implement ESA and particularly experimentation, it's important to have operational guidance and harmonization of concepts, methods at the European level. ESA should be implemented as an integrated planning approach which builds on and create bridges between existing policy, rule, regulation initiatives in the field of water management, but also in other fields related to biodiversity or local development. It is not possible, desirable to quantify or monetize everything. So the level of ESA quantification and monetization has to be adapted to the main goal, the context, and the available resources. The main strength of ESA is to bring qualitative insights on ES and trade-offs between ecosystem services. It gives a good, it is good for description of water uses and services. And then more research is required on links between geomorphological components, or more broadly ecological processes, good ecological status, and ecosystem functioning, and the provision of ecosystem services. We have been a bit long, I'm afraid, but well, thank you. Oh, yes.
Okay, well.
I can reply to the question of Stephen. Can you explain further on the fact that monetary evaluation cannot be done without a large expense? We had a discussion at the French Ministry of Ecology, and they have, and also with Water Agency, they have some broad experience. And for example, they took the example of evaluation which was done on a specific area on the Seine River, or the experience in water schemes where, due to the financial constraint, I mean money which can be put in the evaluation, the boundary of the evaluation of ecosystem service is the boundary of the scheme. I mean the area on which the scheme has to be implemented. But when you deal with, for example, control of pollutants or flood protection, the effects of what you do on a specific area are not limited to the area where you are implementing the scheme. They go beyond, downwards, up to the sea, and even in the sea you will find some pollution, and therefore, if you don't do the evaluation with enough money, you will go to the most obvious, the easiest benefits to assess, and you will lose some very important benefits, which may not be as easy to evaluate in economic terms, but which may be very important, which can save money, a lot of money for the collectivity. And this systemic dimension is very important. For example, in France, you have some water agency who made a global evaluation of the program of measures to have a broad and general view of the effect in a very systematic way. And the both water agency who did that were very found that it brings really valuable information. So that is to say that it's better. Okay, but
yeah. Oh, sorry, I didn't realize you hadn't finished.
Sorry,
I thought that there was a pause there. Well, yeah, I'd like to take the opportunity to say thank you very much to both you, Philippe and Catherine, for a very interesting presentation. I realize we are now at midday, a little bit longer than usual. But if you still have a little bit of time, Philippe, it would be interesting to open out to other questions for the other delegates available. They have two means of posing those questions. There is, as I've provided there, the example of writing on the chat. But for the next 10 minutes, if that's okay with you, Philippe,
yes, that's all right.
People can also raise their hand and put the microphone on if they've set that up. So if you want to speak, raise your hand. We'll connect your microphone, and you can raise a question directly. Or there is via the chat method. So it's now over to you, the delegates. If you also realize it's quite late, so if you need to leave, that's also understandable. But before we do that, I noticed one person managed it. To give a virtual round of applause. There we go. Up on the menu screen. There's clap hands you can see on the right there on the attendee list. Just to show your thanks for the presentation that was made.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Quentin. And Sebastian.
I mean, if there are...
Wait.
Yeah. There is a question coming.
Is typing, so we...
Defining the scale.
Yes, yes. Well, I don't know if I will go as far as... I mean, we couldn't go as far as we expected, and I don't know if I will fully answer to this question. But one thing is that when you deal with a river, you should first provide a kind of broad view at the level of the basin, of the phenomena which are going on, and then after that, if you have to, I mean, you have some services that you can try to assess at a lower scale. For example, we thought to on the Dordogne River, we thought to test the purification of water after a water treatment plan by a radier, I forgot, rifle, I think, rifle, of a rifle, and because downwards you had a bathing area. So we thought it would be very nice to assess the effect of the rifle on the quality of the water, and I mean, to show that people who bath downwards, I mean, they benefit from the very good quality of water. Well, unfortunately, we were in relation with a laboratory, and they couldn't. I mean, they couldn't do it for pathogens. They could do it for chemical products, but not for pathogens. But this is an example where, for a phenomena like this, the scale can be quite local. But as I said before, if you deal with floods, it's very difficult to. I mean, you should to have a very specific area. Nevertheless, I mean, you can have some evaluation. I mean, for example, if people want to put, I mean, a bank on the river or things like this, it can be interesting to show how they benefit from the fact that upwards, I mean, there is flood expansion areas or flood storage area. And what would be the benefit of what they will do downwards or things like this. But this question of scale has to be really adjusted to the problem. And if you and also to be very clear that if you are at too limited scale, to say that, to show that, and to say that what you have give you some indicatives data of what it could be at the level of this area, but the whole area, wider area is concerned. I don't know if I answered to your...
It was.
Okay, thank you.
It seems yes, thank you. Whilst I noticed that a few other people are talking, writing, questions are coming, I've also got this interesting point that you made about the water managers saying there's too much work for hardly any benefit. When I read that, I thought you were talking about the ESAWADI Project's viewpoint. I was thinking there's going to be a lot of comment and reaction to that, I imagine. But that also, because it's the water managers, it shows that there is obviously quite a bit of work to be done in developing the science behind the implementation of ESA, to then translate it into something that is functional.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's what I also get from your conclusions. That it's not ready yet to be an effective tool on its own.
Yeah, that's what we try to show two things. One is that if you want to have data, if you want to have to go far in evaluation, it means that you have some background work which has been done or which is done. But if you have not this data, and you are at a local scale, and they cannot invest in a 2 years program of evaluation with a lot of means, only by description and by analysis, already you can do something. You shouldn't, and maybe, okay, what you can do, for example, for local authority at a local level in relation with a water manager, you can make a qualitative evaluation and say that, well, next time if we want to go further, or if we want to follow the measure, it could be good to have a program to evaluate this type of services. That's what the answer that we have. Our answer is that yes, it's a lot of work. It can be for too little benefit. This has to be seen, but yes, it's a lot of work, but it doesn't mean that you cannot do anything.
I just wanted to add something to Philippe's answer. I agree with him, obviously. This really much, our 3 case studies illustrate this issue, that it's really related to the amount of data already available that determines how far you can go in terms of quantification. I mean, the Portuguese case study, for example, where the research partner had developed lots and lots of data on water quality and economic data in the last 10-15 years. They went all the way to do multi-criteria analysis. This is what we showed you with the SAW and the TOPSIS results there. And that was only possible because, you know, they had a really good understanding of the area. They were part of the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment team for Portugal in this area. And so they had lots of data to play with. However, in France and Germany, it came obvious very quickly that we weren't going to be able to provide quantitative indicators on all of the ecosystem services that were listed in the area. And so what was more effective there with stakeholders was to have more qualitative tools and to show basically linkages and trends and in terms of changes, positive or negative changes on ecosystem services. And I think, going back to what Philippe said, you have to adapt the amount of work. The scale is directly linked to the question at hand and what you're trying to answer and what your objectives are. So you can't. There's no one answer to that question of scale.
And also, I agree with the suggestion of Stefan that it could be a type of rolling implementation of ESA linked to the cycle of river basin management plan. To develop ESA along with river basin management plan and other policies, and this makes a link with the question of Quentin that you may.
J'ai pas lu encore.
Yeah.
Ouais, Sorry, yeah, so I just read the question from Quentin about the work we're doing in France on a specific, it's a biodiversity strategy, regional strategy for ecological coherence, where we include a quick analysis of the different ecosystem services present. That does apply indeed to aquatic media. We do have to, we have included a quick overview of the services provided, but the methodology is, it's literally experts, saying. So it was our take on which ecosystem services can be provided overall by aquatic resources and aquatic ecosystems. It's not because we weren't looking at specific water bodies or specific wetlands for that part of the report. It's very much a broad overview of which ecosystem services could be provided by such ecosystems in favor of, biodiversity management. I hope that answers your question, Quentin.
I think that for me also raises another issue of the use of ecosystem services approach, in that there's, in the sense, because, as Philippe was saying, that it needs to have a lot of money invested to get the data and to have something of value, there's perhaps going to be competition between the Water Framework Directive has requirements, but as you say, biodiversity in general has requirements. There's going to have to be a decision making on where the investment's going to be to allow a study to go in further detail.
Not why. That's. I think it should be. It's a general problem, but there should be more consistency between these different policies. And if some evaluation are made in relation with biodiversity policies, it could be interesting to see how it can be used for Water Framework Directive, and that the requirements on what type of data has to produce and how to produce them, could be done in relation with Water Framework Directive also. I don't know if it is an answer to your question.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point, to have that connection. I think it's something that we have to do a lot of in Europe, having links between the policies and the directives.
About
make them more effective.
The overview of ecosystem services per ecosystem. I mean, what was it?
So the question of Nada and Ton, I was just flicking through the framework of analysis report that we produced. The quick answer is no. ESAWADI hasn't produced a list of ecosystem services by ecosystem type, mainly because we focused principally on aquatic ecosystem. That's the first thing. What we have done is included a reference of the different types of ecosystem services. There's 43 of them, for example, based on the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment. And you can find that on our framework of analysis, which is online on our website, which is mentioned here. But mainly the answers, I mean, I would like to say that it's very much based on a local assessment. I don't think you can necessarily...
But well, we have, I mean, after that, I mean, each partner developed his own list with the services they were considering. And then I have to add that in France, we had, along with ESAWADI Project, we have a PhD thesis in sociology. I mean, it was in sociology, but the person who is making this thesis, Elise Catalan, is also has skills in ecology, and she made a very systematic presentation of the different services related to hydromorphological compartments, like the riverbed, like island, like riffles, like oxbow. The compartments, the ecosystems that you find in these compartments, and the services. So this will be in the annexes of the French report, and you will be able to find them. And anyway, I mean, we give our address on the slide, email address. So if you need anything, please just send a message.
Okay, it's now 12:15. I will say thank you again to Philippe and Catherine. It's been very interesting, and also thank you to the delegates, and your feedback and your questions add value to these sessions. It seems to have been appreciated. So we say thank you to everybody, and
yeah, thank you so much for the...
See you.
Quentin is typing.
And the next webinar is now going to be available. It's the Icarus Project, and that will be on the 5th of April at 3 p.m. French time, if you wish to join us for that one.
Okay.
So, yes, I wish you a good afternoon, and hopefully we'll see you on the 5th of April. I'll speak to you then. Okay. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.